And we're live. What's up, everyone, and welcome to The Great Debate, the place to find a deep, nuanced conversation on the most important issues of our time. Today, we're discussing a topic that is critically important, one that, in one way or another, negatively affects most people on Earth. The topic is rape culture. Last week in Eilat, a southern Israeli city, there are allegations of a horrific gang rape where dozens of men took turns to rape an intoxicated 16-year-old. This horrific incident triggered instant protests around the country and renewed a long overdue conversation about rape culture. Tonight, we're doing our small part in progressing these important conversations, but the conversations don't end here. They must continue in our homes, with their friends, and in the workplace. We've made tremendous strides in the past few decades progressing this important issue, but there is no denying that there's still immense progress to be made, and that progress is made by our actions. So without further ado, I am honored to present tonight's three amazing and inspiring guests. Right below me, I'm very proud to present Sarah Perle Ben Ezra, who is an activist, an educator, a dialogue facilitator. She has worked for many NGOs, including Yala Young Leaders, Jerusalem Peace Builders, and the Arava Institute. She dedicates her time teaching effective communication techniques and speaking up for the rights of women. To the right of me is Judy Weiss, who has been an advocate, nurse, educator, and healer for the past 41 years and dedicates her time to the empowerment of others. She was raised in a time and a place where patriarchy was deeply ingrained as the norm and has had the honor of witnessing the emerging empowerment of women. As a mother of sons and daughters, she has a deep understanding of the impact of societal norms on parenting, on the roles men and women, and the challenges faced by both as we work to creating a healthier world. And below me to the right, diagonal of me, is Sheerle Dove, an activist, wellness coach, a social media influencer. She uses her platform to spread messages of healthy living through positive thoughts, diet, and daily practices, and she's a proud voice for women's empowerment. It is a pleasure to have you three on. It truly is. I think a good place to start is just defining what is rape culture, because it seems like there's even not a clear understanding or confusion around that term. So whoever would like to start, let's begin by defining rape culture as you see it.
Thank you, Adar, and it's very nice to meet you, Judy and Sheerle. So I'm going to jump in, and I also was very surprised when actually you first mentioned this talk happening and that you said it would be about rape culture. And I saw right away that some of the comments were actually saying that there is not such a thing, that it is an exaggeration, that we're making too much of a deal, that we're not really promoting rape. And so what I wanted, and of course, those comments actually came from men. And I was happy at least they were engaging in the discussion. And I was also happy to be able to answer and to have two other voices with me tonight to answer that question. Because I think that in order to understand what we can do and what kind of responsibility we have to make the world and our society safer for everyone, we first need to name things and not to be afraid of naming things. And rape culture is a very loaded, heavy expression. It's a very heavy sentence, and I understand why it triggers some people. But rape culture is not only about, hey, let's go rape people. It's about all those little things that are part of patriarchy, that are defining very restrictive gender roles, both for men and for women, while looking at LGBTQ people as anomalies. That's rape culture. And according to these gender roles, women have to be submissive. Women are objectified. Women are sexual objects. And their voice is less important than the voice of men. And we see that in every video clip made in the 90s and about 50% of the video clips made today. We even see it, there was a new campaign for the clothes brand Castro in Israel for children just a couple of days ago. The little boy was standing and the camera was at eye level. He was fully dressed and he looked fierce. The little girl was lying down on the floor with mini shorts and she had to look up to the camera. Those tiny little things on how we present ourselves, how we present boys and girls, and what role models we offer in pop culture, that's rape culture. It's about criticizing a woman because she's owning her sexuality and saying bravo to a man because he had so many sexual partners. So it's everything that leads to rape. It's not only rape, it's all those sentences using the word whore as a klala, an insult. It's the way we tell a girl to not be a teaser, to not be a slut. It's the way we encourage men to make sexist jokes. It's all those little things that we don't realize are actually leading to rape that we are calling rape culture, in my opinion. And I'm very happy to hear the other voices.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciated your perspective, and I think that you really nailed this issue, because as somebody who grew up in a society where I was totally unaware, it was such a strong patriarchy. I grew up in an Orthodox setting. I grew up in the 60s and in an Orthodox family. I was entirely unaware of how devastating the effects of all those tiny little pieces are on me. And it was only, this is going to sound really crazy, but it was only when Me Too happened that I really fully woke up and I really fully understood how devastating all of the conditioning I grew up with was on me as a person, on my voice. So I think that I'm glad that you pointed out that the word rape culture often is what gets that shock, and that's why, I know why it sort of creates that reaction, certainly in men. But I think it's important for women to be able to share with people who don't agree that there's rape culture, all those nuanced, tiny, little, small pieces that, when you're done, create a really difficult society for women to live in. So thank you.
For me, rape culture is just the normalization of rape. It's, for instance, even someone very close to me, my older brother, said something that was shocking to me not too long ago, that like if a woman is wearing short clothes or provocative clothing, it's something that like it makes sense that she would get raped. And then I said, okay, imagine me in that space. Imagine your sister wearing short shorts and the man who raped her said, but she was wearing short shorts. Would you still feel that way? And that made him understand in a different way that it doesn't matter what I'm wearing. And I'm part of the Free the Nipple movement. I feel very empowered being naked. So it can be very triggering for me when someone says that by sharing my human flesh, my naked skin, that's me asking for sexual energy from someone. It's just blatantly not true. Unless when
when a man is walking around shirtless, nobody's saying that he's teasing us for us to touch him or like to give him some sexual attention.
Exactly. And I believe until the 1912, somewhere around that time, men weren't allowed to show their nipples either. They had to wear shirts to the beach as well. And then they just decided not to anymore. And it became the norm. And it wasn't as sensitive of a topic. And I think that the only way to make the change is if we just start embodying what it means to be a woman for us. But I think what's really important is that we have the support of our brothers during that time. It's very important that the men in our lives, the men in the world, support women in expressing themselves as being women and whatever that means to them.
I'm with you. I echo all of that. maybe one thing I would add, Sarah, you mentioned the post that I made, and some people denied rape culture existing, and their claim was rape culture doesn't exist because by and large society is against rape. It's illegal. It's frowned upon. And, being a rapist might have a worse stigma to being a murderer. So in a sense, there's a truth there, but there's a contradiction in society, because in one hand it's illegal and frowned upon, but then there's all these little elements of society, how women are depicted in TV, how men are depicted in TV, what a manly man is meant to be, all these things that act as a precursor to what is then sexual abuse and rape. And it really comes down to men not viewing women as equal beings. They view them as sexual objects. And when you don't view someone as an equal being, it becomes much easier to then harm them. And I think that's really where a lot of it comes from. What can we do to move forward? What is needed? What individual action is needed, both from women and men, in order to have this conversation, to elevate ourselves, and to stop this abuse from taking place?
I would like to say that that I believe that what's required is a base of compassion between people, between men and women at this point. I will say that as a mother of sons and a daughter, that I understand that there are many men in my life, including my own sons, who were also raised in this patriarchy. And so for many men, they're really not aware. And that might sound problematic to someone. How could you not be aware? But as somebody who wasn't aware myself for so long, I think that there is really a need for men and women to engage in, respectful dialogue in order to start sharing stories. And I think that is the healing that we need to go through. I don't think we should. I think that getting furious at men, even the ones who deny that there's rape culture, probably isn't a great response. I do believe that it requires really, having patience and really sharing as women, sharing what it's like to be a woman, sharing with the people in our lives, the men in our lives, our colleagues, all those people. And I want to thank the men that are starting to open themselves up to listening, because I think that that's obviously critical. We need male partners in this. This isn't going to change unless men like you, Adar, and men your age, I think primarily, are willing to start looking really, really heavily at how they've been conditioned, and own their issues and be willing to acknowledge them. Yeah.
So, Sheerle, I saw you were about to go. Do you want?
It's okay. Go ahead. I can wait.
I'm going to have to offer kind of a different perspective than Judy just did. And I absolutely respect your voice. And I think we need diversity anyway, even within feminism, otherwise it would be boring and wouldn't get anywhere. But I think, to me, anger is important. I want to be able to own my anger and my frustration with the situation. And it doesn't mean that it has to be violent. It certainly doesn't mean that it has to end at anger. But I think that offering that freedom to women to own all those emotions that are also negative emotions, because within the system of patriarchy, within the system where rape culture is surrounding us every day, we were under oppression. It is so some women more than others, of course, and not every man is an active oppressor, true, but within this system, no woman can, within this system, most of the women are victims, and most of the men can ignore the issue because they're not part of the oppressed community and population. So I think first, to me, there's a lot that has to be done. But I think that the first step is to get rid of the hypocrisy of saying, oh, we are so outraged by rape. Because the truth is that in our society, we're not really. Because if you look at what rapists are condemned in our country, in Israel, it's very little. So now in the past week, it's starting to change because all our eyes are on rapists. But before that, most rapists would only get a few months in jail. The maximum, I think, in Israel that you can be condemned to is 17 years or 15 years.
Yes.
And very, very few men who have been condemned have reached those years, or even 1 year in prison, because if they're young, we don't want to ruin their entire life, because keeping someone in jail costs so much money. So yes, we are outraged, but in the same time, we don't follow up. And also, we still live in a society where an entire group within our society marry very, very young people with no sexual education whatsoever, and where women's only duty and only value is through how many children they can actually produce. And this ultra-Orthodox community within our society is given power through the rabbinical court on all of our private lives. And that's not a culture that is protecting women. And so we need to get rid of that hypocrisy that, yes, we're ethical and moral, rape is bad, but what do we actually do with that outrage? We don't condemn men. We feed and support an entire branch of our society that does not protect women, on the opposite, that only value women through their breeding ability with no sexual education. And even more than that, we don't support women who are raped.
No.
Because have you been a woman who go to a police station? It's another humiliation. It's another trauma. I've been, just this year, I went to the police station with a friend who was abused by her partner. And after she talked to a very nice policeman for an hour, he told her, don't do a complaint, don't do the whole procedure, because don't, I don't know how you say it.
Don't file a complaint. Don't file a complaint.
Thank you. Because the process won't go anywhere. It will be his word against yours.
Right.
It will be more traumatic for you than anything else. So just don't do it. Just leave. So there's so much to do, but first let's face our issues. The fact that, yes, we are outraged, but we're already late because we don't do much with this outrage.
And I'm glad you pointed that out, Sarah. Adar, when you said that men say it doesn't exist because, rape is frowned upon and it's not legal, the truth is, on paper, it's not legal. But as Sarah points out, there are so many rapes that are just tossed out. I have a friend who had to leave Israel after she was raped. Nothing was done. She tried desperately to get them to prosecute the men. There was nothing done. In the United States, with all that's going on right now with the police, they discovered years and years of rape kits, thousands of rape kits sitting in closets. I mean, just that is, I don't even have words for that. That tells you what rape culture is.
I looked up at one point how common it is for women to experience sexual assault in any way. And it's something around 3 out of 4 women experience it on the planet. And I think that says it all. I don't know. I don't have one friend that hasn't been sexually harassed or raped. I don't have one friend, including myself. So that in itself is an issue that I can't name one woman that hasn't experienced that. And I think what can really help is to just have more men say, okay, I hear you. What can we do? Let's do something together. Not say like, but what if, like, but it's not what if. It's like, just listen to our perspective. We're the women experiencing these things right now, and we just need to be heard, and we need the support. So I think something that women can do more is to speak out, because a lot of us hold shame around what we've gone through. And I think when we unite and come together and share, our voice is heard. But I do believe in feeling the anger and all those emotions, but I think the message comes across stronger when it's spoken in neutrality, when it's spoken in a way that all can hear. Whenever I feel really angry about a topic, I take a deep breath, and I only talk about it when I'm not about to yell about it. So that's my personal take.
Yeah.
And I really hear you when you say that, like, you don't have one friend who didn't go through that, and I relate absolutely to that. And so, but in the same times, like, the Me Too movement really opened the door, that women started to tell their story, and the emotional labor of speaking up, of naming your aggressor, of saying it happened to me, because you know deep down that some people will judge you for being the victim of sexual harassment or of rape. You know, some people will say, but what did you do? But come on, how did you put yourself in that situation? So because this is the rape culture we live in, speaking up is not easy, because you will be called a slut, you will be called a liar. I don't believe you, he's a good guy. But he was your husband, you owed him that. So all those things, and now with all the latest demonstrations happening in Israel, more and more women are speaking up. And I think that it's because the fact that you don't know one woman who hasn't been a victim of sexual harassment or violence, maybe 10 years ago, you wouldn't have known because nobody was talking about it. So at least now we're aware of it, so we can't hide from it. And what I want from men is more than support and to listen. I want men to say, I fucked up. I want to hear men, you're right, I didn't realize it, but I fucked up. When I was 13, when I was 14, when I was 30, when I was 60, I disrespected a female coworker. I put my hand on a friend when I shouldn't have. I had sex with my wife when I knew she didn't really want it to. I judged my daughter for wearing something or for going late at night when I didn't say anything to my son for doing the same thing. Those are like, because the emotional labor of fixing our society and of preparing a safer future for the next generation, this emotional labor has to be shared. So if it's heavy on women to share what they've been through, and also for men who have been victims of sexual violence, we also need to hear the perpetrators saying it doesn't make you a monster, it makes you a human. And you speaking up, telling me you did something, I will respect you more, because I know that those who are quiet, they're the one I disrespect, because I know they've been part of it, because in that system they had the upper hand. So there's no way they never abused it. So sharing the emotional labor by speaking up, acknowledging what we've done, taking responsibility, and then we can move on as partners.
I want to add something to that. Oh, go ahead, Adar.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in real quick to that point, because I today made a post acknowledging that, I was very much, for years of my life, a part of rape culture, and the fact that I was demeaning towards women. I would consider women sluts if they were sexually open. I would stop paying attention to women after I got what I wanted. And I'm sure that along the way, I have hurt women, and I've reached out to women from my past to speak to them about this. And in reality, I'm sure there's women that maybe I've hurt that I'm still not aware of. And I just want to say that it was very difficult for me to publicly acknowledge this, because of how it seems. I'm acknowledging that I was part of something so ugly, but I feel liberated that I did it. And even if there's some backlash, it's still so clearly the right thing to do. And to any man watching this right now, I want to tell you, speak up, acknowledge your past, acknowledge the mistakes you've made, speak to the women who you've hurt, apologize for what you've done. This is part of the reconciliation process, and it must be done. So, I just really want to make that clear. It wasn't easy, but it's important, and it's clearly the right thing to do.
I just wanted to share that I also believe that sometimes we're not going to get that healing experience that we're going to want from someone that's abused us. I grew up in a family where it wasn't okay to be sensitive or emotional. And like, if I was feeling something emotionally, my dad would just say to my brothers, don't listen to her. She's just being emotional. She's just a woman. And I took the initiative of healing myself from that experience onto myself, because I knew I was never going to get it from my family. And that was really important for me in order to not allow that story to perpetuate, because if I stayed in that victim mentality and that inner child wound, then I would have kept finding myself in experiences like that until I learned how to empower myself and how to stand up for myself and how to show a man when he's not acting in a place of alignment. I think it's also really important in the moment to stand up for ourselves. Actually a week ago, I was at the shuk and a man started touching me inappropriately. And I yelled at him. I said, don't touch me. And I shared my story on Instagram, and many women told me they had the same experience with the same man. And many of them didn't have the voice to say, no, don't touch me. So I think it's really important that we start healing ourselves in order to be the women that can stand up for ourselves.
Sheerle, I'm so glad you mentioned that. And something that actually Adar and I had spoken about briefly the other day, which is that what we can teach our daughters and the younger women is that they do have a right to have a voice and to speak out and to say something when something happens to them. I thought back on every single thing in my life that ever happened, and I have a list that just goes on and on and on and on, and it's just unbelievable. I thought about writing it all down, but it's such a long list of all these events, and never once was I able to react like you just described you react, where you yelled at him or you responded. I was silent, I was shocked, I left, but I didn't have the voice. I didn't feel entitled, I think. I'm not even sure exactly where it was coming from, but I certainly was never empowered to be able to feel like it was my right to say, how dare you, you're being inappropriate, you know. So I think that's a great point, and I'm glad you got to do that.
Thank you, and I'm sorry you went through that.
I think many women, most women probably have experienced things the way I have. Certainly my generation, yeah.
I'd like to point out, we have someone in the comments who is triggered by this whole conversation, and I'm going to use this as an example to show a certain sense of sensitivity and unwillingness to listen. He's a regular guest. I know him already. Ian Lev. First of all, thank you for always being here and engaging. I do appreciate that. But is this serious rape culture? Am I supposed to be blamed for the actions of a rapist because I'm a man? So nobody said that. And please hear me out, because this is an important issue. You're jumping to conclusions that nobody said or implied. We're having a conversation about actions of many men towards many women. You're not guilty by default for being a man, but listen to the very real experiences women go through. You can be part of the solution. The defensiveness shows that you really are not open to hearing the struggles women are going through, because nobody here is saying all men are to be blamed. That's not what this conversation is even about. There's a whole bunch of other ones that he made as well, like how many false accusations of rape have there been? So that's irrelevant. That's irrelevant. That's not what we're talking about, brother. I'm happy you're here, but please listen. We're not blaming all men. We're not. I'm not even. People might have a different approach, but I'm not here to blame anybody. We have a cultural issue that produces individuals that make bad decisions. And I'm not saying this to take responsibility off of people, because personal responsibility is the way to break these societal norms. But we're not here to blame, or I'm not here to blame individuals. We're here to address a cultural issue. So I'm happy you're here, but please listen with an open mind.
And I also would like to bring back to the fact, like, it happens in every debate. It happens in every dialogue. As soon you bring people who have different opinions, that we don't live in the same realities, depending on our background, or gender, or socioeconomic level, and who we follow on social media. We live in totally different parallel realities. And the fact is that today, because I follow, a lot of my friends are women, but also because I follow a lot of women's groups. If it's Lotem, if it's Astikeriot, if it's Kulan, I read a lot of those stories about women being harassed, because those groups want to empower women to speak up, and because they amplify those stories. So not only I live them on a daily basis, being a woman, but also because I'm following groups that make me feel less alone and share those stories. So the same way when I'm working with Americans, Republican or Democrats, when I'm working with Palestinian and Israelis, I'm going to do the same here. If you don't follow women's groups on Facebook or Instagram, please start doing so. Because maybe the women around you didn't share with you what they're going through on a daily basis. So maybe you're not really aware of the scale and why it is legitimate to talk about culture. But then be curious and go on these groups. If you're a Democrat, go on Republican pages. If you're religious, go on secular pages, and vice versa, Palestinian Israelis, because we need to burst our bubbles and understand the reality of the people who are living right next to us. And in my world, I'm surrounded by stories of women looking for shelters, being disrespected, being touched, being abused. And a lot of women not speaking up because they felt alone, because they felt nobody would hear them, or because they would face such reaction that we see right now in the chat. And so we really need to share our stories with more and more diverse audiences. And another thing that I just would like to remind everyone, that we live in Israel. Just last year, a few months ago, we welcomed a bunch of boys from Cyprus who were accused of rape. So it happened, it didn't happen. At the end, they were not condemned. But we're still talking about a group of young men who had sex with a young girl, all of them with the same woman, who were accused of rape, and that we welcomed in the country by having a party at the airport for them. So it doesn't matter even if they really raped her violently or not. It's just like, in what society, this is the way we welcome those boys who clearly had a wrong image of what women value is. And we welcome them with a kippah on their head. We welcome them with confettis. We welcome them with a party at the airport. So again, stop being hypocritical. This is a society we live in. So what is the result of those images on the news on young girls? What is the reaction that a woman who's been harassed, who's been grabbed, who's been abused, if she sees that, if say like, we can't say anything against men, so we're going to stay quiet. And so we need to speak up, but we also need to listen, and we need to share our stories so a more diverse audience becomes aware of them.
I think it's also really important to maybe get clear on what rape means, because from I'm seeing in the comments, it's not clear to people what it means. You ask, is it okay to do this? Even to touch you, is it okay to hug you? Is it okay to kiss you? Ask, just ask, especially if you're drinking alcohol or on drugs, especially if the person can't answer you, that means that's a no. That's 100% a no. I have had a friend where she was so intoxicated that me and another friend had to carry her home. And someone that she had been sleeping with at the time just assumed that he could have sex with her, even though she didn't consent. And at one point did say no. So just ask. If it's not clear to you, if it's not an obvious yes, ask.
It's enthusiastic.
Say that again.
We got a little scrambled up because we lost Judy for a moment. Sorry for that.
Oh no.
I'm having some connectivity issues, but I think it's better.
To answer Sheerle, like, I think it's not only the question of consent, but enthusiastic consent, you shouldn't have any doubt that the person you're touching, kissing, penetrating is up for it. Like, I heard on the radio, I think it was last week, I don't remember if it was in English, in French, or in Hebrew, but it was basically a guy who was saying, no, yeah, like, of course I'm not going to force anyone, but what if I slept with a woman 10 years ago, she was not moving, she was not saying anything, and 10 years later she comes and she says it was a rape. I'm like, dude, you had sex with a partner who was not moving, who was not speaking, and you thought that was fine? Fine, that's not consent. I mean, we have also to understand that a partner who's not responding, that's not consent. So of course, it's complex. And of course, a rape is not only someone threatening you with a knife and a woman fighting for her life. But do you want to have a partner who's not responding at all and you still do your business?
I'd like to, I'm happy we're on specifically the topic of alcohol, because I think it's important. I want to bring up Rafi's question. Rafi's also a regular guest. He's also been on the show. As a man, I would say the most gray area about this topic for us is sex under the influence of alcohol or drugs. Is that always rape? If so, are we all guilty? And I think what Rafi's saying, so it's clear. I mean, it should be clear to everybody. If a woman is unresponsive and you sleep with her, that is rape. I mean, let's make that crystal clear. But there are many instances where men and women are drunk together. They're partying together. They end up having sex, and the next morning, they both realize that they were more drunk than they thought they were. The woman may regret it and feel like she had a bad experience. The man at the time just thought he was having sex with somebody who, was a mutual partner. So I think that's the gray area he's talking about. So I'm wondering what you all think about how we should approach that tricky topic, because, women and men getting drunk together and having fun together is common. What's the judgment that should be made, when we're in those situations?
I can tell you that when I was raising my sons, although I didn't speak a lot about the important issues.
Sorry to cut you off. I forgot to mention this. I am one of Judy's sons. I didn't mention that Judy Weiss is my mom, so just for a little bit of reference. Sorry. Continue.
But when I raised my sons, we didn't have a lot of discussions about rape culture, again, because I was incredibly unaware of how toxic the society I had been raised in was, and I just wasn't aware. I currently can take responsibility for my lack of awareness. But what I always told my sons was, if you go to a party and a woman is trashed, that is not a woman that you should be having sex with. So that was kind of the bottom line. And I think for multiple reasons. One, because a woman who's totally trashed and is drunk, and you don't know if she's really consenting. She might be too drunk to be consenting. And number two, as the mother of sons, I never wanted my son to be in a situation where he had, sex with the woman he thought was consenting and then discovered that she wasn't. And I think that to be safe, it doesn't make sense to put yourself in those situations. Now, that's not a very practical answer, because you're right, Adar, people go out, they party, they're both drunk. And then does that mean every time you're both drunk, you shouldn't have sex? Well, I don't know if I know the answer to that.
I just like to share. Sorry for interrupting you. I just like to share that I've put myself in that experience many times. I actually quit drinking when I was 21 because I realized that I kept having those experiences where I would sleep with someone intoxicated and then regret it later. And I realized, looking back on it in hindsight, that most of the times I would drink was in order to let go of that reasoning voice that I had to differentiate between what's best for me and what might feel good in the moment for instant gratification. So I think that if you enjoy drinking, maybe drink less and not get to the point where you're questioning what your morals are and what your desires are. I think if you get to that point, you've gone way too far. Or learn from that later. I think you have two choices right now to decide, like, to forgive yourself for your past experiences and to decide from now on to be more responsible about how you drink, or to realize that it's something that can continue happening. But you do have a choice in that sense.
And Sheerle, when you talk about that, like, how do you advise a man in that situation? Because that question came from a man, and I think it's a very valid, difficult question to answer. You know, how do you answer that question? Like, does that mean a man should never really sleep with a woman who's
No, I don't think it's his fault at all. Like, if she gives consent and in the evening and in the morning regrets it, that I think that's her responsibility.
I think it's a super complex issue because each case is special. It also depends on the dynamic between the people. Did you know each other beforehand? Is it the first time you're being intimate with that person? Is it happening on the premises of the party between two doors? Are you back at one of yours place? Like, we have to stop pretending that a rape is a cliche. Every rape, and again, rape culture is not only about rape, but it's everything that leads to rape. So all those dynamics, all those social norms of, oh, I'm going to have sex because that's how I'm going to look cool, or I'm going to be drunk and have sex because that's how I am cool. Like, all of those things we need to question, and we need to realize that, yes, it's gray, yes, it's complicated, because it's part of this society and of this culture where we want people to lose responsibility, but within, like, where men will never be judged for having sex with too many women, and women will be judged by how they behaved and how close they were to certain men. So having sex while intoxicated at a party and being visibly intoxicated and intimate with someone, the social judgment will always come on the woman. The social pressure will always come on the woman. So I understand in the comment here that it's like, yeah, but if both were drunk, the man is going to be, the woman is always a victim. First, no. But just think that everything that leads to this moment, that's the woman is being judged and not the man. We're seeing the woman as a slut and not the man. And the morning after, we'll see the girl as a slut and not the boy or the man. So be responsible for that too, and change that too. And maybe being trashed while you have sex is maybe not the best idea. And maybe it's something we can put on pause in our lives. And I don't think it would affect your daily level of happiness that much. Because if you can't,
it'll probably make it better.
Yes, if you can't be intimate with a person in a sober way, maybe there's an issue there. But we're not trying to say, oh, never have a drink and have sex. It's bad. No. But everything between, how often, with who, do you know them? Where is it happening?
Right.
It's a complex
Be more intentional. I think it's about being more intentional how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think if a man is out there and is with a woman who is, you know, visibly very drunk, and he's questioning that, it even enters his mind, it's probably it's just a bad idea. It's just a bad idea.
Doubt.
Yeah, it's a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
And let's be real, drunk sex isn't as good as and high sex, that's a different story. But drunk sex, we could live with that.
It's not that fun.
I think, I think this specific conversation on alcohol has been very productive, because it is one of the largest gray areas. And I think learning how to be more communicative about consent is important. And I think this is also very tricky for men, because, you know, when men watch movies, they view that they view that like attractive male, and how he just will make a move on the woman and how she's into it. And, you know, many men want to be that man. And to intensify that, I think there's a stigma. Many women kind of view it as like kind of sissy if you ask if you can touch or kiss. And I think they don't want to be seen as a sissy. They want to be seen as a man.
It's so sexy.
Yeah.
Ask for your opinion. This is so sexy.
Well, so just a personal story. So I'm actually friends with everybody on this panel. So Sheerle recently had a birthday, Mazal Tov Sheerle. And I asked her if I could put my hand on her, and she said yes, and I did. You know, we've been friends for a long time, and asking, it felt a little foreign. It's like, why, you know, it's still not fully comfortable, but I recognize that this is like a new conditioning that we need to put ourselves through, because maybe Sheerle at that exact moment did not want to be touched, and how would I know if I didn't ask? So, and I'll tell you where I learned this. I learned this actually at Burning Man, when you have 70,000 people in the desert for a week using drugs and alcohol. They tell you you need to ask. You need consent to put your hand on somebody, and it's the way to keep people safe in such an environment. And yeah, I'm thankful for that experience I had with Sheerle. And I don't know, Sheerle, I don't know how you felt about it, but I thought that I saw that as an evolution, as how, you know, I'm acting with my friends.
I felt, I remember saying, of course, like, for me, it's obvious that you could put your hand on my back because we're such close friends for such a long time. For me, it's obvious that, like, you only have good intentions with your touch. But I also appreciated that you asked. It brought up in my mind how unusual it is to be asked that. And I've also been through a consent workshop where they talk about that. And I'm pretty sure one of the speakers is also a speaker at Burning Man about consent. So it's interesting that you brought that up. And it's not only about asking for consent, but it's also having an empowered no. Say no. And then the person say, thank you for taking care of yourself. Knowing that by that person saying, no, that's not right for me, not taking that to your ego, not taking it personally. It has nothing to do with you. That person is going through something within themselves. And I think I'm seeing in the public chat some people getting triggered by this conversation. Nothing is personal directed at you. Every person on this panel is talking from their personal experience as a woman, as a man, and we're just sharing so we can live in a reality where we're all happy to be next to one another.
And I think it's amazing because it's true. Sorry,
I was just gonna ask,
go ahead.
I was gonna ask, how hard is it to say no? But Sarah, you know, finish your point and then we can address that.
And I think I will already actually address that. I was thinking it was part of what I wanted to say. But yeah, it's interesting to see that in the party community, because there's so much room for tragedies to happen, and because there've been so many negative stories happening in the party world in the past, that now the party world already took responsibility, and in many of those party communities, you do talk about consent. You do have workshops about consent. You do have workshops about healthy intimacy and sexuality, and we need to expand that, because it's not only happening, like most rape don't happen with alcohol or with a knife in your hand. Like, we are outraged right now because of the Eilat story, because she was intoxicated, and because there were numerous men over 30 probably, and she was alone, and she was only 16. But that should not be our threshold for outrage. That should not be what we see as rape. Rape is so many other things that are out of the context of being raped by strangers while you're being drunk. And so that's just like, so there are two things here basically. Like, I love that the party culture took responsibility, but we need to expand it, because the cliche of a rape is not every rape. And violence happens in so many different forms and in so many different contexts, that we should have workshops on consent in every school, in every workplace.
I love that.
Because it should be on TV. Yeah. Because those are the discussions that the characters in stupid TV shows should have, instead of making jokes about the girl with the short skirt. Like, the word consent, the dialogue about consent, the enthusiastic yes, the firm no, the questions, those should be the discussion we see on a regular basis on TV, listen to on the radio, and workshop we should all attend. Because it doesn't only happen in this cliche version.
And I think I'm glad you're saying that, because I think perhaps that's why some men who were listening to this were triggered, because for them that cliche is, the woman walking down the street and jumped by somebody who comes up behind her with a knife, and those stories. And that's really not, if you spend time with women and you really ask them what experiences they've had, most of them won't even have anything close to those experiences. They have very long lists of very, very difficult experiences that they've had that have impacted on their lives forever, because so much of it is outside of the cliche area. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Adar, I didn't answer your question, so I'm going to let you ask it again.
Yeah, I just to that point, I even think that there's the majority, I don't remember the number, I think like 2/3 of rape are by people who the woman knows. It's not a stranger on the street. It's from someone that the woman knows. So we were talking about, Sheerle made a great point about an empowered no. And, that to me, men are normally the initiators. So I never had to learn to say no. If anything, I just had to learn how to get rejected occasionally. But, yeah. So I always figured that saying no is easy. And it was a few years ago, a gay man actually tried to kiss me. And that's when I understood how difficult it is. And I'm comfortable saying no, but I felt that I didn't want to embarrass him or make him feel rejected or sad. So that's when I realized that saying no is not as easy as just saying no. So I kind of want to put it out there. How hard is it to say no?
I've been in many experiences where they're friends, they're people that I trust and love. And if it's a random person, it's much easier for me to say no because I don't have a personal tie. But sometimes in the past, I would try to convince myself that like maybe, but it still felt wrong. And then it's not having trust in myself. And I think that we, in general, as human beings, need to put ourselves first when it comes to these experiences. And no matter what you're going through, just say the no. Just say the no, even if it feels bad at first. That's something that we're going to learn over time. And I'm sure that in this generation, we're going to raise children that don't have this issue, but you have to go through the discomfort to get past it.
I also think that little girls, at least when I was growing up, are conditioned to be, that whole smile, blah, blah, blah. Why are you acting like that? You're not being nice. That whole being sweet. I mean, if you're conditioned like that, then no is very difficult. No is not easy. When you're taught that you need to people please and you need to be nice, and that you're getting graded on those qualities, no is not easy.
That's such a good point.
It's very difficult for the men, because I realize that then how is a man supposed to know? That's a valid question. I think there are women that I certainly can relate to the struggle with, how to say a firm no when somebody's making you uncomfortable.
And again, sorry,
I was going to say, Adar knows this. I had a really terrible experience on a date. It was the first date I had been on in many years, and it was recent, and it was very traumatizing, specifically because of this whole no thing, because the man was incredibly touchy and aggressive and just way more, no personal space. I felt extremely violated physically, and I was unable to really say, and that left me feeling really terrible. And Adar and I spent a lot of time talking about that, because I walked away from that saying, how is it possible that me at my age, I'm 62, could have left myself in a situation like that and still not been able to be firm and say I was still being the good girl. And so it's a very hard thing to uncondition women. I'm admitting that that's very difficult, very difficult. And to be honest, I have no idea if this man had a clue that he was making me feel so uncomfortable.
Probably not.
Probably had a clue.
I mean, if he wanted to be aware, he would. I think it's also one thing to accept that not asking the question is making you comfortable, and it's playing on, it's easier for you to ignore the issue, so I'm going to continue ignoring the issue because I have the upper hand. And that's part of the game. And I love that you talk about also conditioning, and I'm going to go back to that in a second, but also a lot of men don't take no for an answer.
Right.
And I will just take the example of being hit on at the bus stop, in the line of Bituach Leumi, in the line at the bank, at the post office, when I was in school, when you're in a restaurant with girlfriends, and someone's going to come to you. And all of those cases have happened to me. Someone comes and says, oh, if you're alone on the beach with a book and earphones. Apparently, I'm not in a social mood. And still someone's going to come, a young man, or not that young, and start talking to me and complimenting me. If I don't answer, he's going to get angry. So I'm going to say, sorry, I'm not. And I apologize. I'm saying, sorry, I'm not interested. And he's going to keep going. And usually, it's all going to end up by him insulting me, saying that anyway, I'm ugly. Or the only way I can actually stop it is by saying I have a boyfriend.
Right.
Because somehow the only version of a no this man can hear and respect is a no because I belong to another dick holder.
No, you're right. You're 100% right, Sarah.
And so that's also part of the rape culture.
Yes.
That our no's are not heard.
They're not respected.
They're not respected unless there's a man next to us. I also once, it was amazing, I was in the street with a man friend, and he just stayed a little behind because he was looking at a window, and a man started to talk to me, and then my friend caught up with me, and the guy was like, oh, sorry, dude, and left. And I'm like, seriously? Like, you had to apologize because I belong to another dick holder. And it was like just insane that this dialogue between men was more valuable than any word I could pronounce. So one, that's part of the culture we live in, where the voice of the woman, when she says no, why? Because also in so many movies, she says no, but if you ask enough, she's going to say yes, and it's going to be so romantic. Because in so many movies or video clips, she says no at first because she's a good woman, she has values, but really she wants it. That's why we need to force her a little bit. And there was this big scandal about the Christmas song in the US, Baby It's Cold Outside. That is like, and it's present in so many movies and so many series. If you watch every Indiana Jones movie ever, they hate each other. She says no, but at the end, Indy is such a man. Of course she's gonna fall. And usually the first kiss is forced on the woman, Indiana Jones. Harrison Ford in every movie, actually, because the same with Han Solo. But those are movies I loved growing up. But those are the movies I was told that was the version of what love is that I was taught. It means that my role is to say no, but the man will think it's a yes. And also, as women, and I know I was also raised in a pretty conservative family, and so I have to say yes and to smile.
Yes.
I'm not supposed to make a scandal.
No.
Mm-hmm. I'm supposed to say yes and consent. I'm not told that my body is my own, my voice is my own. And so men will take advantage of that because they see a woman or a girl who has no awareness of her own worth. So again, we're not accusing anyone here. We're just saying that it's a very deep system, that it's taught by parents, that it's on TV, that it's in the media, that it's our relationship to communication between gender has to be rethought. Because we can all be victims, but in this big patriarchy, in this big rape culture, women will more often than men being the victims. And that's all we're saying. We're not saying all men are monsters and all women are perfect. No, we're saying that within the culture we live in, with the education we've received, with the culture that surrounds us, and sometimes the religious weight that we live under, the voices of women has less weight, and so they can easily be victimized. And we need to take responsibility for that.
Thank you, Sarah. That was great.
Sheerle, I know that you need to run. Is there any final wisdom you want to leave us with?
Yes, I just want to share an experience I had a few months ago. I met a man in Costa Rica, and I don't know if you've seen the Bikram documentary, but I watched it the night before, and I mentioned it to the man, and he started getting very defensive, and he shared his perspective, not specifically about Bikram, about himself, where he would invite women over to his house, and they would do drugs, but they would never say no to him, but he would initiate things and then later complain that he assaulted them, even though they didn't speak up. And it was very important for me to understand his perspective. And I think there is always two sides to a story. So I just want to acknowledge that I do understand that not every woman may have seen that perspective and could have used their voice but didn't, whatever the situation is. But I do want to share a gift that he gave me after I had that conversation with him, when I shared experiences when I was a victim. He held my hands and he looked me in the eyes and said, "I apologize on behalf of all the men that have ever hurt you." And that I cried. It was very healing for me to have a man say that. So if you are a man listening to this debate, you have that power to heal a lot of women right now. It just takes a few words, it takes a little initiative, and it just takes a little love from your heart. So I just wanted to share that little experience.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheerle. It was a true honor having you on, and I'd love to have you on again for another great conversation. And I mean, I'm sure I'll see you soon enough. You're one of my closest friends, so.
Thank you guys so much for having me. You are all really wonderful human beings, and your perspectives are so interesting, and I feel like a better human being after just being in your presence for an hour. Thank you.
Thank you. It was very nice meeting you.
Bye.
And then there were three. Where do we go from here?
I think it's a good question. Where do we go from here?
Yeah.
It's 2020.
Well, I've been wanting to address the man who was at the beginning, who was struggling with, just hearing the word rape culture and all that. And I because I think it's important, I want to say to that, I don't remember his name, but, and all the men out there who are feeling.
His name's Ian, and he's still struggling in the comment section. But
hi, Ian, how are you? I'm going to say this to you. So, Ian, first of all, I'm very happy you're here. And so to any man that's listening and is struggling with this, I understand this is loaded. I get it. I have sons. I get it. I know this is loaded. I want to acknowledge that it's actually very difficult to be a man today, because this generation of men is the first generation in a very long time that has truly been exposed to this kind of change, a radical change in the way society has handled issues like this. So maybe it started one generation ago with your father's generation, Adar, but it was still pretty patriarchy heavy. And your generation is the first that's really trying to figure it out. And it's confusing and difficult. And I think men feel victimized as well, because it's like that comment, are you blaming every man for rape? Are we all rapists? And we're not saying that. But I want to say to all of the men who feel intimidated by this conversation that I'm very happy you're listening, and that I invite you to have these conversations with women. In fact, you are welcome to have a conversation with me. I will tell you all the incidents that I've been through in my life. I think that your ability to hear the nuances, again, as Sarah so well pointed out, that it's not just, the classic rape that you see in the movie, but it's all the nuances that make women not be able to speak up and put them in uncomfortable situations, and all of that. It's so difficult to understand. I get it that it's difficult to understand, but I'm inviting you to speak to the women in your lives. You can ask me, but every woman out there who you think is a friend, who you're close to, take a chance and open that door and walk through it, because I think that's one of the ways that we can start building a group of us who can work on this. It's too important to just ignore. So, yeah, that's my comment.
Thank you, Ima. If the audience has any questions, now would be a great time to ask. I would like to maybe circle back. I think there's one point that it was a little difference in a perspective between you, Judy, and you, Sarah, was anger and its role. And I actually think that there's a clear middle ground, and I'd like to explore that. You know, right when I got into activism around 6 years ago, I remember not understanding why so many activists are angry. I'm like, why? You know, let's just do this from a place of love. Why do you need to be angry? And then I realized that I'm an activist from a place of privilege. I'm not fighting to make my life better. I'm fighting because I look around me and I see people who have less, people who got a roll of the dice. And that just is, in a sense, a cosmic injustice. And if I could do anything to contribute to change that, I will. So I recognize that it's easier for me to say, don't be angry. So, you know, I have had this evolution in my understanding. And I think that we can all agree that the anger is justified, definitely justified. And the anger can also mobilize us, right? If you're angry, you're going to fight. And that fight can solve problems. I think that the concern is, and you know, we see some reactions in the comments. Many men feel like they're under attack, and it makes them defensive. And you know, if you ask men if they think men and women are equal, they would say yes. But if you ask men, are you a feminist? Something like 13% will say yes. And if you ask them why, a lot of them say because feminism is anti-male. So I guess what I'm considering is, how do we need to acknowledge the anger is justified. And one thing you should never tell somebody is don't be angry. That's like just one of the worst, least empathetic things you could say. But how do so we could understand the anger, we use the anger to mobilize us, but how do we also then do that in a way where we're able to reach across the aisle and reach people who the anger might turn them off? So I think that there might be like a healthy balance between, you know, owning our anger, letting that mobilize us, and then also being able to approach conversations compassionately. Would you guys say that that's a fair approach that we can take?
So
okay, go ahead, Sarah.
thank you. So there are a few things I would like to say. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I think anger is very important, and I think it has to be acknowledged and given some room, but it's not the end of the process. It's just part of the process. This being said, so that just to underline what I said at the beginning, it's part of the process, not the end of the process. I'm also a dialogue facilitator, and I work with groups of Palestinians and Israelis. And both when we put Israelis and Palestinians in the same room, or when we put women and men in the same room, we come from different positions. We agree to speak about the same issue, if it's gender equality, if it's fighting sexual violence, or if it's the occupation, or if it's the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But we come from different positions and we are motivated in different ways. And you said that very well, Adar. Like, you can be in a place of privilege. And being in a place of privilege doesn't mean your life is easy, all pink flowers and rainbows.
Right.
It just means that the issue we are talking about right now hasn't affected you at the same level that it had affected me. And so with Israel and Palestine, it's the same. Saying that the Israelis in the circle are on the side of privilege, it doesn't mean that being Israeli is so easy. It just means that the system we're trying to change doesn't have the same weight on them that it has on Palestinians. So we acknowledge the multiplicity of pain, but we also understand that one side has the upper hand, can make more of a change and has suffered in a different way and probably a lesser way. So it's the same for men and women. I'm not saying that being a man is super easy. I saw the pressure my brother was under, living in a very patriarchal family, being the one son with the family name that counted, with man who, my father, who was a man according to the previous century. And so it was hard for my brother to figure out his own masculinity and strengthen his own identity, being the beautiful, wonderful, smart, sensitive man my brother is. And so I'm not saying it wasn't easy for him, but it was harder for me because I couldn't even explore who I was, because I didn't have even a voice to be looked at by my dad, to be respected, to be heard. I had no freedom, and I was judged a lot more harshly than my brother was. Right. So when we enter in a circle of dialogue, it's because we want change to happen. That's the one thing we want to agree on, nothing more at the beginning. We want change to happen. And we need to acknowledge that change is not comfortable, and that making change happening is not a comfortable process, especially for the side who has more privilege. And part of this discomfort in the change process is for the side who has privilege to listen to the anger of the side of the oppressed. And so it's a long process. And right now we're in the midst of it. And processes of social change are rarely clean and neat, and they take decades. The civil rights movement in the US started in the 60s, and it's only now taking a new turn. The feminist movement is the same, but we had also already glimpses of sexual revolution and feminist revolution under the antique Greek. So it's a long process, and right now we're in the midst of it. And it's a little bit messy. It's true. And of course, some men will feel that they are being accused, of course. But from my point of view, it's also part of the process. Because as it's bigger than one person feeling triggered, it's an entire society that has to get rid of the hypocrisy, accepting that we need change, that change can be painful and is definitely uncomfortable, and that part of that change is to hear the anger. Because if we don't hear the anger, then the change will only be defined by the side of the privilege. And we want the change to be defined and the future to be defined by both sides. And so part of it is first to answer the anger. But if the angry side feels heard, if our pain is acknowledged, then I'm fine. I won't have to repeat my anger. But I need to make sure it's been heard, it's been respected, it's been acknowledged.
Thank you for that, Sarah. Judy, would you like? It feels
No,
so weird.
I don't think that Sarah and I are entirely different places on this. I absolutely think people have a right to be angry. There are many difficult stories. I think the point that I was making, and that's in the work that I've done over my lifetime, is that I find that it's much more effective when you approach conflict with love and compassion, and it's easier to get heard when you're not very angry. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have your anger. It doesn't mean your anger shouldn't be given a voice. But I think at the end of the day, once you, as you say, Sarah, once you get it out there, then the work begins. You've been heard, and then you can start working on it, and you have a partnership. So I certainly wasn't saying that women shouldn't ever express anger or anything. I just think that in terms of the long term, that it's much more effective to approach things with calm and as trying to build an alliance with the people that you're angry with, really, with the people you're angry with.
But also within there are so many different cases, because we also need to make room for trans women and trans men. We also need to make room for male who are victims of sexual violence by men partners or by female partners. Mm-hmm. And it's a very, very complex issue because it affects so many of us. And it's never black and white. We are in this soup or pool of very, very many different colors. But the system that we live in, the patriarchy, the rape culture, it doesn't show any of this. nuances. It doesn't show complexity. It's just divide us into groups, men better, women submissive, and we ignore the rest. And part of showing complexity is breaking this model.
I'd like to. I've been, Ian's been very active, and Ian, I do want to try to address what you're getting at, because I think I understand you. There's a new slogan, "Believe all women," and I've seen many men take that as, if a woman accuses a man of rape, she should automatically be believed, and that man should automatically be considered guilty. And it's possible that's what some people mean by that slogan, but I think you're misunderstanding the slogan. I think because most women, there's such a huge problem when a woman is abused or raped, that she's not believed and she's questioned, and she's blamed for what happened to her, that this is a response to victim blaming. It's, we need to believe women. I don't think most of the women saying that are saying we don't need due process. I don't think they're saying that all a woman needs to do is go to the police, say a man raped her, and that man will go to jail for 20 years just because the woman said. That's not the argument that's being made. It's that we need to stop victim blaming, and we need to give women the benefit of the doubt. Why? Because that makes them more comfortable to come forward with the abuse. Most rape is not reported, and most rape that is reported is not punished. And the reason it's not punished is it's complex. Part of it is a result of rape culture, but a lot of it comes down to he said, she said, and so it's often very hard to prove. But we don't have a huge issue with men going to jail for decades for being falsely accused, but we do have a huge issue with women not being believed, and with women reporting rape and nothing happening about it. So
Right.
so that's what's happening, Ian.
That's right.
So I hope you can understand.
Yeah, and Adar, I agree with you entirely that that's exactly the case. And people who say that don't mean that every woman who is coming forward. In fact, someone very close to me, a man very close to me, was accused once. It was an entirely false accusation. Thank God there were cameras that, documented, and the woman suffered the consequences for filing a false complaint. But so it is, I can understand how a man would hear those words and immediately feel that that was unfair, and that's not what we mean. I certainly don't mean that when I say that.
Yeah.
No, but I also think that it's just good to remind everyone of the reality that there are more rapes that are not declared, and among it's about 7, it's only assumed because who knows, but in Israel it's about 70% that would not be declared. And
you mean reported, the person doesn't even come forward to ever say anything. Yeah,
that we don't know about, that doesn't even get to the police, that is not spoken of.
Right.
And then among those who go to the police, the majority don't end in the condemnation of the rapist, because the system doesn't support the woman as it should be, and because proving a rape is very hard, because it's not always with a knife under your throat. And also because if you wait a day or two, your body doesn't necessarily still have the stigma of the violence it went through. So I also, like a friend, the police told her to give up and to drop the charges because she said that the man put a condom on. And somehow it was, so it was consensual. He would have taken the time to put a condom on if it was no, it can be still violent if he takes the time to put a condom on. But so because she mentioned the condom, people say nobody's going to take you seriously. So
right.
I acknowledge that there were some false accusations, but compare to the numbers of rape of rapists who never suffer any repercussion for what they've done. So maybe it's going to be a little messy. Maybe here and there will be a false accusation, but it's still, and I can have empathy for the men who suffer that, of course, but compared to what's happening on the other side of the spectrum, of all the women who are asked to drop charges,
Yes.
or to shut up, or don't have even the room to even acknowledge what happened to them, we need to be aware of the inequality of things. So yes, I have empathy for men who suffer from wrong accusation. It's something we need to talk about. But we can't talk about that ignoring that most women never get justice and that most rapists never suffer any repercussion. And that's a discussion we're having. That's the world we live in today.
So Ian seems to, we're getting there, and I don't mean, Ian, we're virtual friends now, so I hope you don't feel like we're teaming up on you or anything. We're just having a conversation through a screen. But he's asking, and this is kind of the final thread of his argument: should there be a penalty for false accusation? And
Yes.
And they are.
I want to tell you that I agree 100% that a woman who falsely accuses should absolutely have consequences. In fact, I think that's horrific. And not only is it horrific, but it does such an injustice to the women who have been raped. For a woman to file a false accusation of rape punishes every other woman out there who actually has been raped, because it makes her story. Yeah, absolutely. I think women have to be responsible. If somebody does something, it's devastating to falsely accuse somebody. Yeah.
And it's already happening. Like women are paying also like the social price of being admitting that you've made a false accusation is incredibly heavy. So it's not that we're saying women are always right. That's not the discussion whatsoever. But again, we need to remember where the violence is coming from in the majority of cases around us. The majority of violence is coming from the side of men hurting women and not being judged or not being brought to justice, and not even like being faced with the fact that they've done something wrong.
So I want to show you both and everybody else watching what the result of compassionate dialogue is. This is a message from Ian. Thank you. After all that.
Thank you. And thank you, Ian, for listening.
Yeah, Ian, exactly. Thank you. Thank you, because for your questions helped bring productive dialogue and helped us show that we could talk through these difficult issues. I hope you and I hope everybody else watching this left here with something to take home, with a new sense of empowerment and inspiration, and everyone will do their own small part in making this world a better place and elevating one another, so there's less abuse and less pain in this world. And I'll leave it with Sarah and Judy, and it's so weird calling you Judy. But Sarah and Judy, any final words of wisdom?
I just want to say that I'm honored to have been invited. Adar knows well that I absolutely hate public speaking. This was not an easy thing for me to do, but I felt that if I could do one small piece to help heal what really needs a lot of healing, and help create a partnership between men and women, and help also create a partnership where men aren't feeling necessarily threatened, but invited to join, so that we can make this a much better world for everybody. So thank you for that opportunity. I'm very glad I did this, as hard as it was.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Adar and Judy. Judy, it was very nice exchanging with you, and Adar, thank you for inviting me again. I think I really would like to tell women, you're not alone. If you suffered, if you felt humiliated, if you felt that you didn't have the room to say no or to defend yourself, you're not alone. And yes, women are starting to speak, and it's not enough. We need as many women as possible to speak up, from every generation, from every social, cultural background. We need women to speak up, so we can't ignore the scale of the issue we're facing. And so everyone can understand that the change has to be deep and has to be complex because those issues are complex. So I want to tell women, you will find support. If you speak up, you will find people who will support you. If there are organizations like Follow Lotem, Astikeriot, Kulam, and more, people are there to talk. Like if you're not the demonstration type, if you don't want to put your name on your Facebook post because it's too intimate, people can help you amplify your voice and at the same time protect you. And men, if you're horrified by the stories you hear from women, then say it. Because it's a change we can only do together. And we need to include the LGBTQ community, and we need to include the religious communities, and we need to include the party people, because those abuses have happened in so many different contexts and social bubbles. So it's time to burst our bubbles, to follow the groups we wouldn't follow naturally, to listen to voices we wouldn't listen naturally, and to speak up even when we were told to shut up. And the fact that this discussion is happening today is amazing. The fact that the demonstration last Saturday in Jerusalem brought so many women because they were tired of what was happening in the news is amazing. It's going to be a long process. Social change is a long process, but it can only begin if we agree to work on it together. And I really hope that today some people heard something they never heard before. Some people felt empowered. Some people felt less alone. And I hope that you heard something that will help you join the movement towards change and safety for everyone.
Sarah, is it possible for you to give Adar the organizations that you just mentioned so that he can post them somewhere?
Absolutely, of course.
I'm not aware of some of those, and that would be very helpful information.
Yeah.
And if other women have organizations, whether it's in the United States or what other country.
Yeah, I could put them all in the description. And by the way, if you want to reach out to either Judy, Sarah, or Sheerle, their contact information is actually in the description. Their Facebook or Instagram. Follow them, see the work they do, reach out to them. They're very happy to engage. This conversation does not end here. This is just the beginning. So it's been a great pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody who joined us.
Thank you.